Hello, everybody out there. My name is Tyler. I'm one of the co-founders over here at Truffle Shuffle. Today, we will be making wild mushroom fettuccine Alfredo, right? It is very exciting. So, it is going to be quite wild, right? It's going to get wild in here. So, with that, one of the ways that we like to introduce the items in this recipe is to go over that recipe sheet. So I'm just going to go over it real quick. You want to bust out that recipe card. All right. And the first section that you will see is called mise en place. Right, so we all over here at Truffle Shuffle come from a French culinary background. Mise en place is the word used to describe everything in place, right? It's literally what it translates into. So it's all your equipment, okay, all your ingredients, any aprons, right, or chef hats, part of that mise en place, okay? And so, right off the bat, just to go at it from the top, first things first, we will need a cutting board. Look at that beautiful cutting board, right? We will also need a rolling pin. Next, one of our favorite pieces of kitchen equipment. We're going to need a cheese grater, okay? I'm going to put this on 365 degrees of visualization for you. Cheese grater, okay? We're also going to need a little fork over here for making that pasta dough. As well as, we're going to need a knife for cutting up the lovely pasta dough. We will also need a 1/2 measuring cup. Alright. As well as a mixing bowl. We're going to need some plastic wrap. A large saute pan. As well as a little bit of kosher salt over here. Some paper towels. We're going to need a pair of tongs, okay? As well as a strainer and a wooden spoon. I know there's a lot of items you needed for this recipe, but I promise it will come out delicious. And then in terms of our ingredients, we're going to need our 00 flour. Okay? We'll need our selection of wild mushrooms, which I have some over here. As well as a little bit of spinach. And then in this little container over here, we have our egg yolks, our whole egg, and our olive oil, all located together. We'll also need some butter. 2 lovely cloves of garlic. As well as a little bit of Parmigiano. A packet of our Balinese truffle salt. As well as some cream. And if you have it at home, get yourself a little bit of white wine. All right? So those are all the things that we will need for this recipe. All right, so we break this recipe down. We have all of our prep, and then we'll take you through how to cook everything. All right, so step 1 in our prep is we're going to need a large pot. Okay? We're going to fill that up with water. Okay? Put a lid on it, and then we're going to put it on the stove on low heat. All right? Get that on the stove on low heat. And the reason why we need that to be on the stove on low heat is because about an hour from now, when we want to come over here and kick the heat up on that guy and get it boiling, right, it takes 5 minutes as opposed to 25 minutes. So, that is step 1. Step 2, we're actually going to make our pasta dough. Okay? So, to do this, I'm going to work directly on my countertop. So, the first thing we're going to do is make our pasta dough. Okay? Which, we'll need that 00 flour we sent to you. right? And we're actually going to remove some of this flour to act as what we call bench flour, right? Which, whenever you're making pasta, you always need a little bit of flour off to the side in order to make the pasta dough so it doesn't stick to your bench, right? So I'm going to take that half cup measure, come in here, and just remove a half cup of that flour, set it off to the side, all right? Again, that's our bench flour, okay? And so the rest of our flour, we're just going to lay out right onto our work surface, okay? And what we need to do is actually make a hole right in the center of our flour, all right? So I'm just going to come in here with my hand, right? Make it using my crane style approach right in the center of that well, and just very slowly push out the edges, okay? And all we're looking to do over here is just create a little space inside of that flour to hold our egg yolks, whole egg, and olive oil mixture, okay? So once you get that space kind of cleared away over there, right, I'm going to come in here and just add all of my eggs right into the center. And so once you got all those eggs right into the center of that well, right, I'm actually going to use a fork and just kind of very, very gently mix together that olive oil, those eggs, those egg yolks, right? Just to make sure everything's emulsified. That way it mixes up nice and evenly, okay? Just kind of whisk it up a little bit with that fork. Get it mixed together. And once I have those eggs nice and whisked together, what I'm actually going to do is take my finger, right, and use it almost like a dough hook, okay? And it's a very, very straightforward process. Basically, all we're looking to do is incorporate these eggs into this flour, right? But right now, these eggs are completely liquid. So if they break through the side of our wall, they're kind of run all over the place, okay? And so doing this step, what I'm about to show you, is basically just a way to slowly incorporate the flour into the eggs without breaking through the wall that we got, right? So I'm just going to come in here with my finger and just around the edge of the flour, right? I'm just going to drag my finger around the edge and very, very slowly incorporate some of that flour, right, into my eggs, okay? And you want to do this just nice and slowly. That way the flour gets pulled in very, very slowly, right? And again, you're just trying not to break through that wall, right? If you do, it's not the end of the world. Just push everything together, right? Because at the end of the day, all we're doing over here is just incorporating these eggs into our flour, all right? So this is our Nona style method over here. It's how all the grandmothers out in Italy make all their pasta doughs, okay? Nice. And so you'll notice as I am moving my finger around the edge, right, I'm just very slowly kind of pushing out the edges of that well, right? And so as that well gets bigger, from time to time, I just want to push in the sides, okay? Just push the sides in from time to time, right? And then keep going. And again, all I'm looking to do here is incorporate flour into my eggs to a point where the eggs just aren't running anymore, okay? Nice. And from time to time, get your finger right in the center. Just let it all catch up. And over here, during these classes, honestly, we like to show you how to do everything by hand, right? You could totally make this in like a KitchenAid mixer, right? You just throw everything in there and mix it up. It'll work perfectly fine, right? But the reason why we like to show you how to do everything by hand is because you really feel what's going on, right? You really get a true feel for what's happening, which allows you to understand the process better, right? And when you understand the process, then you can recreate it or kind of find a different method to it yourself. So, as you notice, right, my eggs have incorporated a good amount of flour. They're not really running around so much anymore, okay? But again, I'm just kind of pushing that flour in a little bit, right? And again, your finger is doing exactly what like a dough hook is doing, right? If we were to make this in a mixer. As you can see, I'm like pulling all the flour in from the edges, right? Pulling all the flour in, mixing it up with those eggs, and I'm forming a little bit of gluten as I do it. You can kind of see it right there. Nice. And so you're going to get to a point, right, where your egg yolks, you can't really incorporate any more in, right, very easily. And so at this point, I'm going to start kind of pressing my flour into these egg yolks. You see this? So what I like to do is take my hand, right, and just scoop that flour on top of those eggs, right? And just gently press that flour in, okay? And what we're pretty much going to do at this stage is we're going to press and kind of fold that flour in, okay? And we're going to get to a point where we're going to get our knife involved over here too. Make this process super, super easy, right? So, again, we're just pressing that flour into those eggs, right? And if you have any dough kind of stuck to your fingers at this point, just kind of rub them together, right? And get those little bits and pieces off of your fingers, all right? Nice. So at this point, I'm going to switch over to my knife. And I'm just going to scoop my knife underneath, right? And press down on top, okay? And again, this is just incorporating that flour into those eggs, right? And you kind of see like almost like a shaggy looking dough is forming over here, right? And again, just keep kind of folding and folding, okay? And the thing about making pasta dough, right, is honestly, you just got to channel that inner self-confidence, okay? So just have confidence in this recipe. It will work. All right? It always seems like at some point when you're making pasta dough that it's not going to come together, right? It looks all types of crazy. But then you're going to turn that magical corner, right? And you're going to see it and say, wow, that looks exactly like beautiful pasta dough. So at this point, right, I've folded up my flour a good amount of times, right, into my eggs. And it has formed this kind of shaggy looking dough, right? So any dough that you have on that knife, you just want to incorporate on top of that, on top of the rest of the dough, right? And then I'm just going to continue kind of folding over this dough very gently a couple more times, right? And so at this stage, you'll notice, right? Look at this dough forming over here, okay? And again, it looks kind of crazy, but This is what we're going to knead together to form that beautiful, silky smooth pasta dough. All right? So, once you get to this stage, we call this the shaggy ball stage, right? Once you get to this kind of shaggy looking stage, just clear all those other little pieces of that pasta dough off of your work surface, right? And get it completely cleared off, okay? You can just, honestly, you can think of those little pieces as like speed bumps to success, right? They're just going to get in the way. They're not going to do anything beneficial. All right? Beautiful. And then again, just kind of rub your hands together. Get any pasta dough off of your hands. Okay, that way they're nice and clean. And then what I'm going to do over here is get a light sprinkle of my flour on bottom and on top. And I'm going to start kneading my dough. Okay? And so, pasta dough requires a good amount of kneading. Okay? It's a dough where, because we have to roll it so thin, the structure of the dough has to be really, really strong. And the way that you get that strength is through the elasticity that's formed in the dough when you knead it. Alright? So, in order to knead my dough, I'm going to take the palm of my hand, okay? And I'm going to press down on top of my dough. Alright? And I'm going to show you from the side how it's going to look. I'm going to press down, I'm going to roll my dough forward. Okay? And then what I'm going to do is fold that dough over, turn it a quarter turn, right? And do that again. Okay? And so at this stage, when the dough's a little bit wet, right, it's going to take a few kneads to kind of come together a little bit. Okay? But you'll really see here in a second that flour starts to hydrate, right? Those eggs, and everything starts to come together. And what you basically want is flour that feels, or you want a dough that feels just like Play-Doh, right? Literally, you want it to feel exactly like Play-Doh. And you notice how just a couple times of kneading, right? Look at my dough. It's already starting to come together, right? It's got that kind of Play-Doh look to it, right? Looking gorgeous. Again, if you have any dough on your hands, just kind of rub them together, right? It'll come right off. And then again, if your dough is slightly sticky, add a little bit of flour, but only add a very small amount, right? Only a little bit. You can always add more. It is very difficult to take it away. All right, so I'll show you one more time from the side now that my dough's kind of come together a little bit, right? So I'm kneading my dough, right? I'm turning it, folding it, right? And then with the heel of my hand pressing down and pushing forward. And you want to get that roll, all right? And then again, turning, folding, rolling. You don't want to do this. You don't want to do this. Right? That's not kneading anything. Right? You want to roll the pasta dough. Okay? If you're not getting that rolling action, you're not forming that gluten. You're not forming that elasticity and the strength of the dough, which is super important. Okay? And so with pasta dough, right? Honestly, you can't really over knead this dough, right? You can't really over knead it. At the restaurant, honestly, we knead the dough for like 15 minutes at a time. So, at this stage, what I'm going to do is knead this dough for about 8 minutes or so, okay? And you'll notice that the dough will change, right? From being this kind of, you know, a little bit rough looking shaped, to it'll be super, super smooth and silky. All right. So again, I'm just going to keep kneading over here for about 8 minutes and keeping your workspace nice and clean, right? And only adding flour if the dough is sticking, right? If it's not sticking, don't bother. Alright, so as you can see, I've been really kneading this dough and rolling it, right, on my work surface, right? And you really see how that dough really changes texture. Can you see that? Look at that. You see how it's silky smooth, right? And what you'll notice is if you very lightly press on the dough, it'll actually bounce back up at you, right? Very, very slightly, right? Very slightly. But just a little bit. And what that is the gluten in the dough is active, right? And it's elastic. It's like an elastic band. When you pull it, it snaps back, right? It's the same thing with strands of gluten. So what we want to do at this point, because that elastic band is so tight right now, if I tried rolling this out right now, it would just keep snapping back. Right? So we actually need to rest this dough, okay? And that's the only way you can rest it, let it relax, and then it's much easier to roll. Otherwise, you're just going to be fighting that dough the entire time. So, in order to help with that, right, we'll take a piece of plastic wrap. Take a piece of plastic wrap. Just wrap up my dough over here. Alright? Look at that. Just let it hang out for about 10 to 15 minutes. Alright, so at this point, that dough is resting, right? We gotta let it hang out for a little bit longer. And so what we're gonna do now is we're gonna wash the mushrooms. Okay? And so one of the things about washing mushrooms is, it's perfectly fine to do. I know there's a lot of like questions or stipulations about washing mushrooms, but the way I was taught is as long as you wash the mushrooms and then immediately dry and cook them, you're perfectly fine. It's when you wash mushrooms and then store them, right, in the fridge or something like that, that the water breaks down the mushroom and turns it to spoil much, much faster, right? So again, if you're washing them, drying them, cooking them in the same day, right, or the same couple hours, you will be just fine. So with that, I'm going to come over here to my selection of wild mushrooms over here. Alright? And these first mushrooms, right, I'm just going to wash here in warm water. Okay? And so this other point is, again, one of those small pieces, but it's very, very helpful, right? Because warm water enables dirt to be removed from the mushrooms easier, right? As opposed to cold water, which would make the dirt really, stay onto the mushrooms. So I got my bowl of warm water. I got my mushrooms, right? I'm just going to place my mushrooms into my warm water and just very gently agitate them. Okay? Just very gently agitate them. And you want to, with your fingers, if you see a little bit of dirt on a certain part of the mushroom, just kind of rub it with the back of with your finger. Just kind of rub that dirt off. Okay? So, these guys are looking nice and clean. Right? And so many times it just takes one rinse to kind of get them nice and clean. Some mushrooms it might take more. But just get most of that dirt off there. And then come onto a landing zone, right, of like a plate lined with little paper towels. Okay? So now I got my first mushrooms out. And then I'm just going to repeat with my other mushrooms, right? So again, warm water in my bowl, mushrooms in, okay? Agitate them, which will help release that dirt from those mushrooms, okay? Just kind of give them a little agitation. And you'll see if the water itself gets a little bit cloudy, right? Then you can fill up another bowl with warm water, right? And just repeat this process, okay? Beautiful. So, once I got these guys nice and rinsed, again, come in there, shake off as much of that water as you can, and just transfer these guys onto a little plate lined with a paper towel. Alright? So now these mushrooms are nice and clean, we're just going to bring them over here and portion them up. Alright? So, we're going to do nice bite-sized pieces over here, right? So about 1-inch pieces on these beautiful mushrooms, okay? And it doesn't have to be perfect. You can kind of eyeball it. As they cook, they're really going to shrink up, right? So you can cut them a little bit larger than you would think, right? And so as you're cutting these guys, if you notice any parts that have a little bit of sand in them still, right, you can just set them off to the side, kind of re-rinse them. Make sure they're nice and clean. That way you don't get any grit in this Fettuccine Alfredo. Nice. And so now we'll portion up my next set of mushrooms. Right? And again, we're just looking for kind of bite-sized pieces over here. Alright. Nice. And you can choose whether you got mushrooms that are kind of larger or smaller, right? If they're small, I'm honestly going to leave them whole. But if they're large, right, I'm just going to cut them up to nice pieces. And again, if you come back through over here and you see any that have a little bit of dirt on them, just kind of rinse them off a little bit more, right? This kind of the stage where you can catch. You can kind of play that final like quality control, right? Before it goes in with the rest. So, once you have those mushrooms nicely cut and portioned, again, just transfer them back onto a nice little plate, right, lined with a paper towel or something. Just kind of assist with drying them off just a touch more. That way they're ready for the saute pan. Look at that. Look at that selection of mushrooms over there. Absolutely beautiful. Alright, the next step is super straightforward, right? We just need to peel and mince up our garlic. Okay, so just come in here, crush that garlic, the flat side of the knife, right? Remove that peel. Nice. And then just trim off any roots, right? Or any kind of pieces of the garlic that we don't necessarily want to eat. And what we need to do over here at this point is just mince up this garlic, okay? And so we're looking to get it minced nice and fine. Pretty much with the goal of having the garlic cut so small that when we go to eat the finished pasta, we don't really bite into a piece of garlic so much as just feel the garlic, right? Sorry, Rip. Nice. Once we got it sliced, we're just going to come back through here and rock the knife back and forth on top of this garlic. Just to make sure it's minced up nice and fine. Okay? Nice and fine. Then come back. One more time. Just get it chopped up nice and small. Okay. Once you got that garlic minced, just transfer it into a little bowl, right? Or onto a little plate or something. Nice. And there you have it. Our lovely little minced garlic. So now that our dough is at time to rest, right, and hang out, the reason why you need to wrap it in plastic wrap or put it in a plastic bag or kitchen towel, right, is so you don't form a skin on the outside of the dough, right, which, you know, it will affect the finished dough because you'll kind of have these little dry bits in it. So that's why it's important to keep that dough wrapped up as it rests, okay? So at this point, I'm going to take some of my bench flour, just dust up my hands, okay? Get my hands dusted up. I'm going to dust up my work surface too, right? So I like to just spread out a little bit of flour on my work area and then just sprinkle a little bit of flour on top of that dough as well, okay? And then I'm going to get my rolling pin, right? Whether you got a rolling pin or a wine bottle, whichever that is, just give it a little dusting, right? And now we're going to roll this dough out. Okay, so now that this has had time to rest, again, this dough is going to be much easier to roll than if we didn't let it rest at all. Okay, and so I want to come in here and I'm just going to roll this dough out, right? And we only want to add a little bit of flour only if we need it, okay? Besides that, you really want to avoid using flour if you don't need to. So what you'll notice is I'm rolling my dough out. I like to flip it over a couple times as I'm rolling it, right? To make sure that I'm getting kind of an even roll on this dough, okay? And then from time to time, I'm just gonna roll this dough, right, vertically with the goal of I want to get a really nice rectangular piece of dough in my finished product, okay? So, again, keep rolling out that pasta dough right into that nice long rectangle, right? And what we're shooting for here is a piece of dough that's thin enough that we can read a piece of paper through it, okay? So, once you have that piece of pasta rolled out nice and thin, right? The way that you test if it is thin enough, right, is you gotta be able to read a piece of paper through it. Okay? Look at that. Truffle Shuffle. Alright, so now that we got our pasta nice and thin, right? So thin you can read a piece of paper through it. We need to actually fold up our dough so that way we can portion it super quickly and efficiently. So what I like to do is just give myself a little sprinkle of flour, okay? Rub it into my dough, right? And I'm actually going to fold this dough about 3 times, right? And I like to add a little bit of flour between each layer just to make sure it's not sticking, okay? Second fold. A little sprinkle over the flour. Last fold, right? Exactly. And again, this just helps this process happen faster, okay? So, I want to start cutting from the end, right? And I'll begin portioning up my fettuccine directly from the end. So, some people like to square up their pasta. If I gotta be completely honest with you, I don't like to waste pasta, right? So, I'm just gonna come in here and just start cutting. And so, fettuccine is about, you know, about 3/8 of an inch, quarter to 3/8 of an inch thick, okay? So, we're just gonna come in here and cut strips, right? That are about 3/8 of an inch thick, okay? So just to show you what one of those beautiful pasta strands looks like. Look at that. Right? Just want to lay out some of that pasta. Okay? And again, it's really important that you roll out that dough thin enough, because when you cook pasta, right, because it's made of flour, right, there's a lot of starch in it, it's going to absorb water. And so the dough will always, the finished pasta will always be about 2 times thicker than the pasta before it goes in the water. Okay? So, with that, I'm going to continue cutting up this dough into my fettuccine. And you gotta say it like that. You gotta say fettuccine. And then, once you have the fettuccine cut, honestly, you want to lay them out in their individual strands, right? Make sure they're not really bunching up on themselves, not sticking to each other. Look at that. Nice. So you want to just lay them out into their individual strands. Nice. And then once the fettuccine is all laid out, it really helps, right, to get a little extra flour on there, okay? Really get a little extra flour on there. Kind of get that fettuccine, right, with that extra little bit of flour. And look at that. Beautiful, fresh pasta, okay? So, we're just going to let it hang out here on the cutting board until we are ready to cook. What we want to do is preheat our saute pan, right, over about medium-high heat, and just melt all that butter down, okay? Just melt all that butter down. Let it get nice and hot and foamy, okay? And then we're actually going to use that butter to saute our mushrooms. All right, so whenever we're cooking mushrooms, especially ones that have been washed, right? They have a little bit more water in them. We want to cook them over really nice, hot heat, okay? So make sure that butter gets nice and foamy, nice and hot. And at this point, I'm going to add all those mushrooms into my saute pan. I'm going to saute these guys. I'm not going to add any salt quite yet, right? I want to saute them over that nice medium-high heat, right? And just cook that water very quickly out of those mushrooms and get them nice and tender. So this will take about 2 to 3 minutes. And what you'll notice, as mushrooms cook in a saute pan, what they do first is they release their liquid, right? So if you see any excess liquid at the bottom of the pan, that's just fine. But we want to cook these mushrooms until all that liquid has cooked off and the pan is dry again. That way we know the mushrooms are sauteing. now that our mushrooms have sauteed, right, they've released that liquid which has cooked off, right? Next, we want to add our garlic, okay? Add our garlic to the pan. And we just need to cook this garlic very, very quickly, right? We don't actually want to get any color on the garlic. We don't want it to caramelize, right? But we want to get some heat on it to just remove that kind of raw garlic flavor, okay? So, as you can see over here, just stirring that garlic into my mushrooms, right? And again, this only takes about a minute or so. And once that garlic is cooked, we're going to add our white wine, right? So again, if you got that half cup of nice dry white wine at home, add that to the pan, okay? And then we're going to keep this pan over nice medium-high heat and just cook this wine down until there's almost no liquid left, all right? Which is called, in French, we call it au sec, okay? And what that will do is that'll make sure all of that wine flavor is concentrated, right? Which we want in our finished dish, okay? It gives the dish a really nice subtle acidity. So now that our wine is cooked down, as you can see, the pan is almost dry, right? There's almost no liquid left in it. That pan, or that wine has reduced, right? My mushrooms are glazed. And at this point, I'm going to add my cream to the pan, okay? I'm going to bring this up to a boil, right? And then I'm going to turn the heat off, okay? And this is the base to our sauce over here, right? Really building those layers of flavor. Sauteed those mushrooms in that butter, added our garlic, cooked that out, right? Our wine. And now that we've added our cream, right? Again, we're just bringing that cream to a boil. Turn it off and remove that pan from the heat. So now, at this point, I want to turn my heat up all the way on that pasta pot, get that water boiling, okay? And we'll get ready to cook our pasta. Nice. So, my water's boiling. What I want to do is I want to lightly season this water with some kosher salt, okay? Get it nice and seasoned up. You don't want to add too much salt because we're actually going to use this water to add to our sauce base for this pasta, right? So once that salt is in that water, just go ahead, give that water a stir, all right? And just add that beautiful fettuccine into that water, all right? And we're going to cook this for 2 minutes. So now at this point, you want to remove 1 cup of this pasta water and actually add it to our saute pan, and that is our timer. That is our 2-minute timer. So you want to add some of that pasta water to our sauce, okay? And I'm actually going to drain our pasta. Beautiful. Nice. So, now that my pasta is drained, right? Looking absolutely gorgeous. I'm actually going to add all of my pasta into my saute pan, right? With my sauce, okay? And this next step here, honestly, is pretty essential for cooking really well-made pasta, you always have to finish the pasta in the sauce, okay? So I'm going to turn my heat on to about medium-high, right? And I'm just going to spread that pasta into one even layer, right? And at this point, I like to use my tongs, right? Just spread that pasta into one even layer, right? And what we're going to do is actually braise this pasta in that pasta sauce, okay? And so as this is cooking, this is going to take about 2 to 3 minutes, right? As this pasta is cooking in that sauce, I want to move my pasta around, right? Jiggle that handle around, just very gently stir it, okay? And what's happening is the pasta, right? The starch from that pasta is letting out and mixing into that sauce and emulsifying, right? And then that sauce, because of the addition of that starch from that pasta, it kind of thickens up. And this is when the pasta and the sauce go from being 2 to being 1, okay? This is the marriage of the pasta and that pasta sauce, okay? So we're just going to cook this for about 2 minutes to retain that real nice al dente texture, right? And so just stir that pasta as you're cooking it. And you'll notice that that water will get that pasta sauce, like I said, get a little bit thicker. It'll really glaze that pasta. And the sauce will really stick onto those noodles, right? So at this point, right, my pasta has cooked in that sauce, right? I'm going to show it to you. Look at that. See how that pasta is glazed in that sauce over there? All right, see that? And the sauce does look a little bit loose, but this next step is really going to tighten everything up, okay? So that pasta is looking beautiful. I'm actually going to taste a strand of this pasta. Perfectly cooked. Alright? So at this stage, I'm going to turn the heat off. Okay? And I'm going to grate half of my Parmesan cheese, right, into this pasta. And it's important that you have the heat off when you add the Parmesan, because if you boil the Parmesan, it'll actually curdle. Okay? So go ahead, stir that Parmesan in, and you'll see the Parmesan just kind of thickens up that sauce, right? Really thickens that sauce up. And now you can really see that sauce just holding on to that fettuccine, right? Look at that. Oh. So at this point, I'm going to come in here, get a quick taste test on my sauce, right? Mine tastes good, but certainly needs some salt, okay? So I'm going to come in here, sprinkle a little bit of that Balinese truffle salt into there. All right? Just a couple pinches. And again, just stir that salt in. All right? Give another quick little taste. Delicious. Mine actually needs just a little bit more salt. All right? And look at that beautiful pasta. Okay? And so the next step, and basically this is the last step in our cooking process, is we actually want to add a little bit of spinach on top, right? Gives us a little bit of that color, that beautiful flavor, right? So just add that spinach on top and just stir that spinach into the pasta, okay? And you'll see that spinach will kind of wilt down a little bit, right? Gives us that really nice green color. All right, and it adds that really nice flavor to the pasta as well. So you can see that. Oh my gosh. Come in here one more time. Ooh. Look at that pasta. All right. So again, just get that spinach coated in that sauce. All right. Now it's time to plate it up. Nice. So our pasta is cooked, right? Tasting absolutely delicious. So you know all that's left is to plate it up. All right. So bust out your favorite serving vessel. I love serving this family style and then grabbing our plates directly from there. So grab out your vessel and let's plate this dish up. I got my cast iron pan over here. All right. And what I like to do is come in here and just stir that pasta up one more time, right? And honestly, I like to just commit all at once, right? I like to grab some of that pasta and then with the rest of that pasta, just commit, right? And get it into that vessel, okay? Stand it up a little bit and then just fill in the cracks, all right? Oh, look at that. And so you see how the sauce really sticks to the pasta? That's exactly what you want. You don't want the sauce and the pasta to be separate, right? You want them to be one item together, okay? And the last but not least, over the top, come in here with some of that Parmigiano, right? You got that Parmesan cheese over the top. Gotta make sure you got plenty of Parmesan on there, okay? And last but certainly not least, one final sprinkle of that Balinese truffle salt. Amazing. And so there you have it. That's our beautiful wild mushroom fettuccine Alfredo. Incredible. So now it's time to call all of your friends, right? Show off that beautiful pasta and sit in and dig into it.